I'm sitting in the Gathering studio with Emmy Award-winning documentarian and founder of Healing Hands of Joy in Ethiopia.
Yes.
Allison Shigo. And I've heard so much about you from mutual friends, and so it's actually really good to hear that you don't leap tall buildings in a single bound, you don't change in a phone booth, you don't walk on water. You're a normal person with an extraordinary story.
Thank you.
But it started as a filmmaker.
That's right. I was working full-time in New York as a documentary producer, and I was really thinking about leaving entertainment at the time. I just really felt like God had a greater calling for my life, and I felt like entertainment was not the place to fulfill that, but God had other plans, and he kept me at this production company, and within a year of me being there, this film project, this story of an amazing hospital in Ethiopia that treats women for obstetric fistula came into our office, and all of us as filmmakers that had really traveled the world had never heard about obstetric fistula, and we were shocked that...
Let me stop you there, because this is a subject that, you know, some people would say, wait a second, someone's going to do a film on a fistula. A, what is a fistula? B, why would you be doing a film on that?
Right.
So maybe we need to answer those two questions before we go on.
Well, exactly. It was, so a fistula is a horrific childbirth injury that occurs mainly in developing countries where women don't have access to emergency obstetric care. So they'll be in obstructed labor, sometimes for days, and the baby will finally die. But what's worse is that they wake up with a fistula, which is a tear between the birth canal and the bladder, and sometimes the rectum, and so they're incontinent. And so then they further face social consequences. They're divorced, they're ostracized, really no one in their community wants anything to do with them. And so they're left rejected and isolated for the rest of their lives unless they hear about a fistula hospital and a cure. And so this little column that we read in 2003 by Nicholas Kristof explained the fistula hospital and explained the story of one woman who was literally, set off in a small hut behind her family's home and could have been eaten by hyenas. And we just were shocked and just said, how could this be happening to women, in this day and age when there is maternal, health care, there is modern maternal health care. And so I personally just kind of also, I really felt like this was God saying, this is, what I want you to focus on. And so I just took the story and ran with it. And it wasn't easy to pitch to broadcasters a story about obstetric fistula, and some of the conversations with Hollywood, New York execs about fistula in the middle of the conferences could be quite funny.
But you've gotten really good at it.
Oh.
I mean,
right?
I'm not weirded out.
I've gotten in 10 years. Oh yeah, absolutely. And so we did end up getting the funding at least to go to Ethiopia and to start filming. Not enough to finish the film, but it was that trip that really changed my life because I've got to meet some of these women face to face.
Walk to Beautiful, where could I find it? It's just on Netflix, or
yes.
Can I get this, can I order? I mean, what do I do if I want to see this film?
So Walk to Beautiful, we ended up eventually selling it to PBS and to Nova, and thankfully with their help we won an Emmy Award. And so it is available via the PBS website, and they'll send, a DVD. I think you can also watch it online, like via YouTube, like a legal link. So, or let me know and I can, get you a copy.
Now, you said God was kind of speaking through this. Obviously, your faith was in some way dictating some next moves. Tell me about that.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think that first of all, it's funny when I think back on it and how you always kind of think you know better than God, as to what your plan should be and where you should go and what you should do. And this, being able to go to Ethiopia and work on this film and to see how it's, changed my life and so many others' lives. It's just amazing to see God, work in such a better way. One of my favorite phrases is, good is the enemy of God's best. And I think that, being able to go to Ethiopia has been the best thing that's ever happened to me in terms of, really being able to help in a small way that I can. And so when I was in Ethiopia for the first time, it was about 10 years ago now, and I was just amazed at what a sense of peace and just feeling at home in a foreign country. It was my first time in sub-Saharan Africa, and I just, fell in love with the country and the people, and of course spending time with the women. And looking for characters, because that wasn't an easy thing. So many women living with fistula are hidden away from society. So we were in the countryside for quite a while trying to identify women that had fistula.
I can imagine that would have been unbelievably difficult, because these are people that are ostracized.
Yes.
So even the question, can I find these people, would raise a cultural question for you, I would guess.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. We were actually getting a little worried because we had set up a few weeks for scouting and identifying characters. And ultimately, I was with our assistant cameraman who was Ethiopian, and we would just go to the marketplaces and health clinics to be able to ask around, do you know anyone that maybe is, and the symptoms are, leaking urine. So it was almost like a wild goose chase in a lot of ways. But once we found these women, I mean, they were like, there's hope, there's help, there's a hospital. It was just, and then to take them to the hospital and for them to see hundreds of women like them, suffering, and to kind of just see this relief that, they could be cured. Was really profound.
Now, I'm not a filmmaker, but I've often been told there's a need for some sort of dispassionate distance from the subjects that you're filming, so that you can basically do all the things you need to do to produce, direct. But it appears as though, as you interviewed these women, something was happening to you in that relationship, enough to even start an organization. So tell me about that.
Well, I think, we kind of, in some ways, crossed the, boundaries in several ways. But I was the co-producer, so our director did most of the interviewing with the women, and of course had a translator as well. But we did intervene as filmmakers in a lot of ways, and because of and that intervention, to me, really pointed out the gaps in service delivery and provision for women with obstetric fistula. Some of the women, that were in our film, one had lived with fistula for 9 years, completely despised by her brothers and sisters, and she was traumatized. And so she was able to be cured, but basically was returning home to the same circumstances.
So you still had a social problem.
Exactly.
Physical, fine. Social, we still got need.
And she's trying to raise a daughter, divorced and pretty much destitute, never had an education. And another one of our characters, Wubete, who is 17 and just, most beautiful teenager, married at 14 and had been married 4 times by the age of 17 when she finally developed a fistula, and her little small body, she's under 5 feet tall, probably like 70 pounds, just destroyed her bladder. And so she actually couldn't be cured. After we met her at the hospital during her 3rd surgical attempt. So we intervened as filmmakers because she was asking the fistula, hospital staff, is there a job here? I can't go home. My father has abused me. I have no mother. I have no education. Can I mop the floors? And they do take in a lot of women like that, but they were full. And so she was going to be begging on the streets of Addis. And so we helped to link her with a orphanage up in northern Ethiopia, where she ended up becoming a house mom and going to 1st grade, and just, changed her life. And so again, that really, to me, highlighted the need for a social reintegration program. And then all these women that are hidden with fistula, there was no outreach and there's no community awareness. There's, no work to sensitize the community that fistula is not a curse. It's preventable, it's treatable, it's curable. So that was, where the, desire to continue to help these women started with Healing Hands of Joy.
Tell me about Healing Hands of Joy, because that really is a departure from filmmaking.
Yeah.
I mean, did you feel as though, as you started this, you knew what you were doing, and what is it that you did in starting this organization?
Yeah. No, I didn't. I had no idea what I was doing. But I think it was, just the women that we worked with, just really broke my heart. And just knowing that there were, more women in Ethiopia that were still, living in the shame and living with fistula, and that the women that were at the hospital, their return home could have been better supported. So I was focused on finishing the film, and because that was a very important way to also raise awareness and advocate for these women in the U.S. and around the world. So for the next few years, we did finish the film and did screenings and started to really see how so many people were not aware about obstetric fistula. And then I was invited back to Ethiopia in 2009 to do a screening of the film for the Minister of Health.
They had not seen the film.
No.
Wow.
And that was a really profound moment, almost, more important than winning that Emmy, because to have the Minister of Health, really hear from the women in his country, just how dire their circumstances, were, and what needed to happen, I think has really helped to launch, this. Now there's a fistula elimination campaign in Ethiopia. But for me, I was already, God had kind of planted the seed. I mean, I'd really wanted to start an organization and didn't know how to go about it. And then I read an article actually in National Geographic that was about a program in India that trained women that had leprosy as village health workers. And that was sort of the aha moment where I felt, okay, God, this is what we can do. We can actually train women that have suffered from fistula to be ambassadors in safe delivery and to go back into their communities and provide them with reintegration support. So counseling and maternal health education, income generating skills training, support their livelihoods, but then also give them this role in their community where they had been seen as a fistula, sufferer, but now they're equipped with this, knowledge and empowered to go back to educate pregnant women to stop the cycle of new cases of fistula.
Henry Nouwen's term "wounded healer" actually comes to mind as these women who have gone through so much now are tasked with going back into their community and healing a really bad situation. I've got some numbers here that I pulled up. I'd like you to comment on them. These numbers, to me, were overwhelming. 9,000 new cases of fistula in Ethiopia, just Ethiopia, every year, contributing to an estimated 2 million cases reported in more than 44 developing nations worldwide. But you say this can be prevented.
Yes. I mean, it's why fistula has been eradicated here in the United States. Basic maternal health care and emergency obstetric care. So access to C-sections. So when a woman is in obstructed labor, she'll be able to get a C-section. And in terms of prevention, obviously, as you know, education is so key. And so in Ethiopia, and the reason why it's so prevalent in Ethiopia is because there's been a tradition of home delivery. And of course, the health system, and the mountainous terrain and the lack of transportation.
You don't have an adequate health system to meet every need of a woman who's in labor.
Right. Yeah. Exactly. So there are a lot of compounding factors, but just basic maternal health education and reproductive health education that women are aware that giving birth is actually a health issue. It's, you need to be with health professionals while giving birth. Currently, I was shocked by this number. Out of 3 million women that give birth annually in Ethiopia, 1 million give birth at home. And so, a third of the women are giving birth at home and for various circumstances. But one of the things that we've really found with a lot of the women that develop fistula is that they've given birth at home and they don't go to a health center where there is a midwife who might be able to call an ambulance to come take her to a hospital where there is emergency obstetric care like a C-section. they're not going to the health center until it's too late. So they're at home giving birth, and then once they realize 48 hours, 48 hours, the baby's not coming out normally, then they panic and call a traditional ambulance, which is, 12 men carrying them on a stretcher over the mountains. And so by the time they get to the health center, it's just too late. So what our ambassadors are doing is they're going door to door, talking to pregnant women, sharing their testimonies as fistula survivors and saying, look, this is what happened to me. You know this. This is why it happened. They have didactic picture books. And so because of this, we're going to, we want you to go to a health center to get prenatal care, to connect with the midwife, to come up with a plan and really be prepared for a safe delivery.
Well, you had used 3 words: empowerment, prevention, and education. I'm going to guess this is what you mean by empowerment.
Yes, it's incredibly empowering. One of our amazing ambassadors that graduated last year, Gojam, she is a 23-year-old single mom. She was married at 14 and developed fistula. Her daughter did survive the delivery, but she was divorced, and so living on her own and really struggling, and finally was cured, came into our program, and at graduation day she said, my community knew me for fistula, but now I'll be known as an ambassador. And this role it transforms their lives. It really does give them this real purpose. And they're working in concert, with the health workers and the midwives. So we do stakeholder workshops to connect, these women. We're not just sort of thrown back into the community, but it really elevates their status. And of course, the economic support, the microloans, and that helps as well. For them to be seen as, productive members of their community after, being deemed useless for so many years. And
when I saw this film, I saw it in an art studio or an art film place. I was one of 3 males in a theater full of females. I actually remember it very vividly because toward the end I turned to the friend I was with and I said, it's really important I leave before the film ends. And she said, why? And I said, because if ever the truth wills out, they're going to realize I need to be lynched. I felt so strongly, and the film wasn't trying to make a male, female, but all my travel in Africa, all my travel in under-resourced places, all my travel where I've seen gender politics play out.
Yeah.
That is a fairly significant issue here.
Yes.
What do we do with that?
Well, we have actually one of the really successful new program initiatives we've launched is male family member training workshops. So at graduation, we actually invite the husbands, if they're still around. It's about 50% of the women that are still married, and brothers, fathers. And a lot of these men are also the leaders within the community. So we invite them to our graduation. So we do a whole training workshop for the men. And that's been really powerful to see how, when they're also aware of what has caused the fistula, and some of the fathers, it's just heartbreaking. They share, I wish I had kept my daughter in school. We had her married, at 8, 9. Kind of this revelation, these are some of the contributing factors, but it's their awareness. Then they really come alongside, are the ambassadors, the women that had suffered from fistula, and they really pledge to help be a voice, just to within what they do in their community and whatever role they may have, but then also to support, their wives or sisters or daughters in this work.
Is it difficult to get the men to come?
No, it's actually in Ethiopia. It really is just awareness and education. I think that there's a real willingness, to listen and to have change. And even in our work with religious leaders who are key influencers, in the rural communities, there's not been any, when they know that it's about health, it's about, mothers, about saving, their mothers, saving their wives and daughters. They do want to be part of that. And it's also a key with letting the priests know that there are fistula hospitals that can treat women, because while the women won't go to church while they have fistula, they will sometimes be in contact with priests. And so if they are aware that there is help, can really it can really support more patient identification.
Well, you're a woman on the go. I saw pictures of you climbing Kilimanjaro. I've seen, again, what I'm told, I don't sense the healing hands of Joy's, the last chapter here. What's on the horizon for Allison?
Well, we really over the last 6 years have worked to refine our model, and also working to design programs for women that are incurable, which is another. There's not a lot being done in the obstetric fistula global community, but also really getting to the end line of eliminating fistula, starting in Ethiopia. We have been approached by a number of other countries that want to replicate our program where there is fistula. Mentioned 45 other countries, so Kenya and Madagascar and Tanzania and Malawi. So we're now looking to partner and work with other organizations to be able to help women in other countries beyond Ethiopia. So I'd like to see those two things done before I completely move on from fistula. And then who knows? I maybe go back into filmmaking. I do love film, and I love the ability to really raise awareness about issues through film. I think it's extremely important. So I don't know, or maybe I'll come travel with World Vision.
Come on, we'll take you.
So yeah,
Well,
but we'll see. God knows,
It's such a delight being with you this morning. So thanks for joining us here at the gathering.
Thank you. You too, Steve. Thank you.